Studio too, and joining us, Gabriel, and thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, we'll go straight into the dailies, and as you would expect, the headlines is on the Deputy President. On the Standard is what next for Ruto. Daily Nation is who's next on the chopping board. We know what's been happening this week with the PG meeting that the President called, which some political, those allied to the Deputy President have said it doesn't qualify as a PG meeting, but that is a discussion we're going to get into. But I'd like us to look at other stories because we'll dig into this quite extensively when it's time to do that. But let's look at page 2 of the Standard. And Magoha picks a team to plan for school opening. We do know that schools are one of those areas that have been completely have had to change how they do things by virtue of the fact that children are not going to school. But the Ministry of Education has made 2 announcements so far. 1, that there could be return of students to school, and 2, that exams are not going to be postponed. They're still planned to be done within schedule and within time. The question, of course, is, are these students ready, and how are they being prepared? So Magoha has picked a team to plan the opening. And Gabriel, just your thoughts, first of all, on the change that we see that has taken place on the schools. And it looks like we may not really go back to the kind of schools that we thought before, but Magoha here is picking a team to ensure that students first of all go back to school. Is it time? Do you feel that we are ready for students to go back to school?
Thank you, Michael, once again for inviting me. Well, first of all, we commend what the Cabinet Secretary for Education has done, and you're quite right that schools have actually taken a beating, and this one it's a given. You've seen mainly. Primarily, the people or the schools that have really taken a beating are the public schools. You've seen private schools; most of them have actually come up with something throughout the time when during this COVID era when school was cancelled, and they've been running virtual classes. But the most affected institutions are those from the public domain. So I think if you are going to compare apples to apples, it is actually coming out to fruition that the schools which were run privately, they are actually ahead of the syllabus. So that means CS Magoha bringing in a committee to start looking into ways of bringing the other kids, mainly from the public schools, to come back into the fold means that they don't lose much on the curriculum. Correct. When we talk about exams, I still do not see I don't want to pen in whether the exams will happen or not. Question will be, will these kids be prepared? Are they going to be at par with those who are in private schools? So, I mean, it is a very welcome move for that task force to sit down and be able to find ways on how to get schools, mainly those from public schools, to come back in and be able to, to try and play catch up now with those from the private schools.
Right. Now, one thing that has, come into the fore in regards to schools is the disparity between private schools and public schools. Right. And COVID-19, of course, we knew this before, but this has really just exposed it and brought it to the fore. Isn't this an opportunity for us to try and at least have that balance? Because it's always been unfair to have the students sit for the same exams, correct, yet the facilities that they learn under, the conditions that they learn under, the quality of possibly even things like labs and that, of course, is completely, two worlds apart. It's literally night and day. Isn't this an opportunity for us to even clean up our education system, don't you think?
Michael, again, you're right on that. The disparity has always been there. When, even whether you're looking at it from a management point of view, whether you're looking at it from an infrastructure point of view, whether you're looking at it from a human resources point of view, private schools have always, had an upper hand in that. But there's something critical that we must address this morning. Michael, you remember when Jubilee came in, they had this amazing idea of DLP, Digital Learning Program, which was actually domiciled at the Ministry of Education and Ministry of ICT. And, we expected there to be an element, of synergy where, every child, as you are told, from class 1 was going to have a laptop. If only we had built capacity into such a program, Michael, now this one tells you where we would be if all children were able to access not only the laptops, but also to access the internet services, all schools to be connected. I think right now, every person would be, home happy, or women, or children, if we had invested deeply into technology. And by the way, it just opens up, as you're saying, it is an opportunity now for us to develop capacity in schools, mainly public schools, to ensure that should we ever, come, to such a pandemic, we are able now to, to have all our ducks, swimming in a row. But then again, you have to ask, we've had the time. So really, we need to play catch up now to ensure that if, like we've talked here in the past, it happened once, Michael, it may happen again. So we just, like I've told you, we just need to put, to ensure that our ducks are swimming in a row, and then we'll be sorted. So yeah, you are quite right. This opens up an opportunity for us to build capacity and clean up, like you've...
All right, and that's the story that we are referring to, is on page 2 of the Standard. Magoha picks team to plan for schools opening. I wonder whether you feel that your children are ready for, exams and for school, because there's also the question of COVID-19 is not yet behind us. How are they going to get to schools? But we do know that school transport can be a challenge, and they normally are, carried in one bus. Social distancing is a new phenomenon that we had not, sort of considered, even as we were planning our transport and putting our buses together. But there you go. That's a story on page 2. Just read it and find out what that is all about. Now, there's a story on page 7 which is political, and this is to do with the Orange Democratic Movement, and they say that the handshake is still intact. Now, Gabriel, I know this is where you're a fish, you swim when it comes to matters politics, and we have seen a little bit of a change.
Yes.
One of the things that I would highlight is from the time we saw the handshake between ODM and Jubilee, or let me say Raila and Uhuru, we had not seen those allied to the Orange Democratic Movement leader, Raila, castigate or even, say anything negative against government until last week. When was it last week or last week? But when we had the likes of James Orengo coming out to say that the government has failed. We had the likes of Junet Mohammed coming out to say that, this government is literally failing its own people. It needs to stop. But ODM has now come back with a rebuttal and said the handshake is still intact. Do you read anything into this?
It's too early to read anything, but like you've said, last week was actually a political, let me call it a political fun moment. Most of us never expected, given the fact that the handshake was there, and there had been, the cordial relationship between the president and Honorable Raila Odinga. We expected, now, things to be at least, come up with an element of sobriety. But what we saw last week was, ODM actually almost going for a jugular, saying, there are some of the things that this administration has not done right, in matters how they've dealt with the COVID, the issue of the money, the accountability and the transparency of the billions that have been given to the COVID fund actually came up. And, it took everybody, with a surprise. And people started talking, is everything, is the handshake still intact? So, Edwin Sifuna coming to confirm that the handshake is still, intact is a good thing. But then, again, Michael, we should also not run away that even if the relationship is cordial, even if there are things now that, that relationship seems to be, it's no longer an issue about shouting, the way things were, prior to the elections or right after the elections. It is always good to hold the government, responsible in some of these things. Just because you're supporting government does not mean you cannot criticize government. It's actually the president who said in one of these speeches, I think it was in one of the address to the nation, he said, what, if you're going to oppose me in a respectable manner, and if you're going to support me, do also, the same in a respectable manner. So the president has opened up himself, not only for, people to be able to ask him questions, he's opened up his administration for scrutiny as well. So that means if you're going to do any of those, do it in an orderly manner. The other thing, we also have to give it to ODM. They did not go out for the jugular. They actually pointed things that are somewhat factual, and it is a high time we look into all the government to some of the things that
your thoughts and whether this concerns you. There's one of the and I quote, I think one of the leaders in ODM was saying that the relationship between President Kenyatta and Raila is still intact. But which of course we know there is a place for leaders, as they are the ones who literally lead their parties. But there is concern sometimes when you talk about democracy, there is no space or room for somebody to have a divergent view. And we've seen this happening. For instance, Moses Wetangula is one of those who suffered the brunt of going against party, ideas, and he lost his seat in the Senate. Not his seat, but his position as, minority leader. Your thoughts on whether in our political parties and in our democracy, if we can call it that, there is actually room for you to have a divergent view from the leaders?
There's one thing when we talk about democracy in the first world and democracy in our country. We are still a growing nation, and there are some of the things when we talk about the sphere of democracy. There are things that we may not get right. Half of the time when it says you're supporting an administration or you're supporting an individual in a democratic setup, sometimes when you criticize them, it is taken badly.
Negatively.
But in healthy democracies, there's always room for somebody to reach out and say, you know what, I believe probably what you're doing it the right way, but probably you're using the wrong methods to attain the very same goal. So there should always be room to be able to correct, mainly when it comes to the top echelons of leadership, where people will sit down and agree to disagree. In fact, that's how you build a democracy. That's how you build a healthy country, where you say, your ideas, as much as they are appreciated, you can also listen to our ideas and see how you can bring them in, marinate them together, and see what the product or see the kind of product that they can produce. So I think we are still learning. Like I'm saying, we are a young country, democracy. We can't compare ourselves with the finer and the richer democracies. But I believe, Michael, we will get there. We will get there. The question that we should all be asking is, do we have the tolerance that it takes, or should we be trying to move into a direction where we tolerate one another when people, make utterances, when people are able to reach out and say, and it's not only, by the way, it's not only the big political parties that we are talking about. Even in mashinani, when you want to reach out to the local leadership, is there tolerance that they are going to listen to you? We've been treated to a lot of drama. Even you've seen the Nairobi county, where if you are not supporting the governor, if you actually say something against the governor, next day you're fired. Out. So So I think we need to be a country that is tolerable when it comes to politics.
Views. And I guess that's what democracy is all about. But like you say, it's still a democracy that's maturing. The only question is, for how long is that going to be going on? But anyway, we'll come back to matters democracy, because that's one of the things, of course, now we see playing out in Jubilee, as we discuss that later on. But there's also an article on page 8. Eastleigh leaders now call for mass testing across the city. And of course, we know this, the Ministry of Health has been very, very on the front line of ensuring that we're informed, and they take necessary action to ensure that we flatten the curve. Whether that curve is flattening or not remains to be seen. But your thoughts on, first of all, the approach that Ministry of Health has taken so far. I remember when COVID-19, the first case of COVID-19 was identified in Kenya, Kenyans were literally waiting for what we'd call a total lockdown. That has not happened so far. And there are two schools of thought. There are those who feel that that is what is required for us to flatten the curve. However, as an economy, we may not have the backbone, the infrastructure, the ability to do that kind of lockdown. On the other hand, there's the other school of thought that says, for the kind of economy that we are, it's good that the Ministry of Health has somewhat closed down where it needs to, but allowed things to continue, because that's the kind of economy that can handle that. Your thoughts on this, Gabriel?
Thank you again, Michael. That's actually a very pertinent issue, and that's actually a very good question. You see, first of all, we have to give kudos to the Ministry of Health for what they've been able to achieve. The other, I think some time back when this matters COVID started, became, you could see that now we are heading into the deep end. people started throwing out arguments, but it was good to realize that nobody had a manual on how to deal with such a pandemic. The entire world, yes, the entire world started at the line of startup. So, I mean, you saw the kind of ravaging that the pandemic did in Europe and the United States and, some parts of China. That means we have done our very best at this point, but we'll need to keep trying. We need to keep continuing. You've put it quite correctly. There are so many things our economy cannot take. We are actually starting to look at the opening up domestic travel. You saw yesterday, Kenya Airways is actually asking for a government to assist them with about 7 billion of the emergency fund. Failure to which, there's not only Kenya Airways, many countries will go, will go belly down. So that just tells you, yes, one of the things that we have to be mindful of is our economy. We need to open up. We are, a while ago, we were just talking about opening up schools. What does that tell you? As we move to flatten the curve, yes, there are going to be measures that are going to be taken. They may not be that popular, but they are supposed to be done. Like the locking up, obviously, many people did not support that. But if you look at the grand scheme of things, you will see if we are able to bring down, not the testing. We are able to up the testing, but also bring down the infection rate. Michael, that's how we are going to defeat this. So it is up to Kenyans to start listening together. And this one, we have to make it clear. Sometimes it's not always the right thing to keep throwing punches to government. The government has a front row seat, or rather, better yet, they have a bird's eye view of the entire situation. So it is good always to keep listening and to keep following advice, from our health officials on how to go about dealing with this thing. There could be things that we do not like. There could be issues, like when they find Mike on the road after curfew, they take you to quarantine and they don't give you. Those problems are going to be there, but we should not fail to look at the overall big picture. The overall big picture is that we are fighting to flatten the curve, and that's not only it. We are fighting to bring our economy back to where it was. I mean, even before COVID, our economy was, not going the right direction. So we need to open our business. I'm glad I saw, the regional heads coming together yesterday, and what I even heard President Uhuru Kenyatta pushing was, to open the free movement of our goods within our borders. Everybody is looking at a time when, Michael, we are able to open our borders, failure to which our economy continues suffering.
Absolutely. And talking about flattening the curve, there is a story on the Daily Nation. Prisons, a ticking time bomb for coronavirus, and not just prisons, anywhere where we have, huge numbers of people. And as a country, one of the things that we, of course, are concerned and worried about is the slum areas, high-density areas, because those are other areas that should there be a case. And the fact that we've not been able to roll out mass testing as we would have wanted may still be giving us a picture that may not be realistic. So as much as we support government, one of the things, of course, I believe that we should be doing is ensuring that we have mass testing, because now, should the prisons and should the high-density areas begin to have that community transmission of the coronavirus, then that is a disaster that we're staring at. Gabriel, don't you think? Totally.
You're very right. And mainly when we talk about the high-density areas, the issue, again, it's not just testing alone, Michael. We have to be very alive to this. Yes, it is. In fact, that's where we should be heading, where we do as much testing as possible within a day. But also, something more significant which must come to play is that even with mass testing, what must we do for those who have contacted the virus and those who have not contacted the virus? We must continue, making sure that we live according to the regulations and stipulations of the Public Order Act. Failure to which, it does not matter how much we test, because as we test these ones, the ones who are tested before who are negative, they've already done their shenanigans, they are positive again. Right. So it will be just a circle, it will be just going down in circles. So as much as we are doing mass testing, we must also ensure that we stick to the rules and regulations and the stipulations of the Public Order Act. Absolutely. Again, failure to which it will be just a circle running back.
And sometimes you'd understand the frustration the Minister of Health has displayed as he's giving the update because of how Kenyans, I'd call it Kenyans behaving badly. I mean, he gave us an example which became, of course, yes. Was a wash on social media with how Kenyans will go and have one sausage and 2 beers, then go into another. So maybe just also to just, applaud, and not to applaud, but to appeal to Kenyans to also just obey the rules because it's for our own benefit?
You know, Michael, again, Kenyans behaving badly. You know, at some point, Michael, we have to treat this disease or this pandemic with the seriousness that it deserves. We have the numbers, we have the statistics of what is happening to other nations. And I'm only glad, you know, I believe, you know, God has been on our side. You know, we've not seen, you know, the uptick on the numbers that we've seen in other places. But that does not mean we cannot get there, you know. The fact that people are, you know, when you're told to follow a simple guideline of, you know, just ensuring if you go to an eatery, you're about 6 people and you still, you know, maintain that social distance. Those are just not words. These are actions that we must take and itemize and ensure that we follow to the core. You know, when you're told about entering a matatu, it should not, you know, it should not be crammed. I mean, these are things that we must take to heart. When you talk about Kenyans behaving badly, I think it speaks to each and every Kenyan that, you know, at this point, we just need to follow rules. You know, it does not hurt for us to flatten the curve because, hey, you want to go to that eatery. You want to move around to take that beer. But you're forgetting that if we only stick to these regulations, to these time that we are being told, we can flatten the curve quickly, we can open up our country, and then we can move now to taking those 7, 10, 9 beers, you know.
Without necessarily having to order sausage for that.
Exactly. So the faster we move to flatten this curve, the better that it will be for all of us and, you know, for our economy.
For our economy.
So, I mean, this is it's a slam dunk. We don't actually need to be reminded all the time how to act. We don't need to be reminded how, you know, how to sanitize. We don't need to be reminded. I mean, now, this one should be an order of call every time we wake up, every time we are going out, every time we are venturing out, you have to remember your masks. I mean, this should be the daily norm, you know, as we speak.
And it looks like it's the new normal. It just might be our lives from here moving forward, because that looks like the way to go. As we wind up, of course, the other issues that we've had and the other thing that might not be helping in flattening the curve is the stigma that comes with if you're found positive. COVID-19 linked to stigma hinders pandemic fight, and this is not out of information. I think the Ministry of Health has done their best to give us information as to what we need to do with somebody who is positive. But the minute you go into quarantine or isolation, when you come out, there are those issues that one is facing. There's a story in The Nation. I was alone and became so depressed that I started nursing suicidal thoughts. So maybe, Gabriel, as we are winding up the newspaper review, just to mention that this is another area that we need to be careful about, because, again, one of the issues that we are likely to find after post-COVID is mental health issues that many are going to be going through.
You know, Michael, it's a situation where you never thought that you would be staying at home, you know, for all these days without end. But I think the most critical thing that many people, you know, that is leading many people to have mental issues. I was just discussing this with somebody, is that you don't see an end in sight, and that's very critical. You know, if you are just staying home and somebody told you, Michael, I need you to stay home for 2 weeks, that is easily done because you can count the 2 weeks. You know, I'll be out in day 14. But this one, no, you don't see, you know, an end in sight. And so it actually just multiplies the problems. But then again, as much as we are talking about doing things like exercises, I know we've had many people come out to show us, you know, how to do exercises at home. Not only that, you've seen the artists and the creative industry have come up with so many things that you can be at home and you're able to engage. You know, the other day, I saw some people, some young kids who are able to come on TV and they are able to rabble the other kids at home and they're able to do fun things. So those are some of the things I think that you know, are going to contribute to keeping our mental health in check. Yeah. But more than that, I think, Michael, we cannot go without talking about the issue that you've raised about stigma. We have to realize that you may be walking, looking healthy, doing healthy things, but you are symptomatic, as they call it. And the fact that you do not know you have it, when you know you have it, it is actually a good thing, because now you even know how to not only protect yourself, but to protect others. So we should not, this thing of people feeling as if you've come from quarantine, you're still able to spread. I think we need more information that should be delivered to the country, that this is not what you call a killer disease. As a matter of fact, the big percentage, up in the 90 percentile from what we are being told by professionals, will actually get the mild side of it. So
Absolutely.
Again, we need to ensure that the knowledge that comes, we treat it also with the respect that that it has. The issue of having or bringing stigma into the issue will actually work or put us into a disadvantage.
All right, it's now 28 minutes after 7. Want to take a short break, but a quick reminder of that question that we are asking this morning, and would like you to interact. That's where we're going to start off the discussion when we come back after the break. What do you think is the way forward for Jubilee